Hi, and welcome to Historical Influence. Here, we explore amazing stories of people and events that shaped our history. Join us to learn, discover, and get inspired by the past in a fun and engaging way. The American Civil War, which raged from April 12, 1861 to May 26, 1865, was a defining conflict in the history of the United States. Fought between the Union in the North and the Confederacy in the South, this war was the culmination of decades of tension. It remains the costliest and deadliest war ever fought on American soil, leaving an estimated 620,000 to 700,000 soldiers dead and millions more wounded. This brutal conflict not only tested the nation's survival, but also reshaped its identity, ultimately leading to the abolition of slavery and forever altering the course of American history.
By the mid-19th century, the United States was a nation deeply divided by economic and social differences. The North's economy was industrial, with manufacturing and small-scale farms, while the South's economy was agrarian, relying heavily on the labor of enslaved black people to cultivate crops like cotton and tobacco. The central dispute leading to the war was whether slavery should be allowed to expand into new Western territories. Growing abolitionist sentiment in the North clashed with Southern fears that their entire economic and social structure was under threat. Key events inflamed these tensions. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 allowed new territories to decide on slavery through popular sovereignty, leading to violent clashes in Bleeding, Kansas. The Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision in 1857 affirmed the legality of slavery in the territories, and John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859 convinced many Southerners that the North was determined to destroy their way of life. The election of Abraham Lincoln, who opposed slavery's expansion in November 1860, was the final trigger.
Following Lincoln's election, 7 states, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America in February 1861. They seized federal forts and assets within their borders. Lincoln, in his inaugural address, declared secession legally void and vowed to maintain possession of federal property. The crisis came to a head at Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina, when President Lincoln ordered a fleet to resupply the federal-held fort. Confederate forces demanded its surrender. After the Union commander refused, Confederate artillery opened fire at 4:30 a.m. on April 12, 1861. The fort surrendered less than 2 days later. This attack ignited a patriotic firestorm in the North, and Lincoln called for 75,000 militiamen to suppress the rebellion. In response, 4 more states, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee, seceded and joined the Confederacy. Initially, the conflict seemed lopsided. The 23 Union states had significant advantages in population, manufacturing, and railroad construction. However, the Confederacy possessed a strong military tradition and some of the nation's best commanders like Robert E. Lee. Early hopes for a quick Union victory were shattered at the First Battle of Bull Run in July 1861, where Confederate forces under General Stonewall Jackson routed the Union Army. In the Eastern Theater, Union General George B. McClellan's Peninsula Campaign in 1862 was thwarted by General Lee's forces in the 7 Days Battles. Lee followed this with a victory at the Second Battle of Bull Run and launched his first invasion of the North. This advance was halted at the Battle of Antietam on September 17, 1862, the single bloodiest day in American military history. with over 22,000 casualties combined. In the Western Theater, Union General Ulysses S. Grant achieved early successes, capturing Fort Henry and Fort Donelson and winning the brutal Battle of Shiloh. Union naval forces captured the critical port of New Orleans in April 1862, a major blow to the Confederacy. The war was fought across vast territories, from Virginia's battlefields to the Mississippi River, marked by ferocious combat and staggering casualties. Initially, preserving the Union was the North's primary war goal, not abolishing slavery. However, the conflict's nature evolved. Following the strategic Union victory at Antietam, President Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation on September 22, 1862. Effective January 1, 1863, the proclamation declared that all enslaved people in the rebellious states shall be thenceforward, and forever free. This was a pivotal war measure. It deprived the Confederacy of its main labor force and shifted international opinion strongly in the Union's favor. The proclamation also authorized the recruitment of African Americans into the Union Army. By the war's end, about 190,000 black soldiers had served, making up 10% of the Union death toll and providing a crucial advantage in manpower. Their service and sacrifice were instrumental in the fight for both Union and freedom. The year 1863 marked a critical turning point. In the East, General Lee launched a second invasion of the North, leading to the Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania from July 1st to 3rd. In 3 days of fierce fighting, Union forces under General George Meade repelled the Confederate advance. The battle, the war's bloodiest with over 50,000 casualties, ended Confederate hopes of invading the North. Simultaneously in the West, General Ulysses S. Grant's army concluded the long siege of Vicksburg. The city's surrender on July 4, 1863, gave the Union complete control of the Mississippi River, splitting the Confederacy in two. These twin victories were strategically decisive. Grant's success in the West, culminating in the Chattanooga campaign, led Lincoln to appoint him commander of all Union armies in March 1864. Grant then implemented a strategy of total war, aiming to destroy the Confederacy's ability to fight. In 1864, Grant began a relentless campaign of attrition against Lee's army in Virginia, fighting brutal battles at the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor. Meanwhile, General William Tecumseh Sherman captured Atlanta in September, a victory that helped ensure Lincoln's re-election. Sherman then began his infamous March to the Sea, devastating a wide swath of Georgia to destroy the South's economic and psychological will to continue the war. By the spring of 1865, the Confederacy was collapsing. After a 10-month siege, Grant's forces broke through Lee's defenses at Petersburg, forcing the evacuation of the Confederate capital, Richmond. Lee's army, surrounded and exhausted, had no path of escape. On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered his Army of Northern Virginia to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, setting in motion the end of the war. Other Confederate forces surrendered in the following weeks, with the last major surrender occurring on May 26, 1865. The Civil War left a profound and lasting legacy. Slavery was abolished nationwide with the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865, and 4 million enslaved people were freed. The nation entered the Reconstruction era, a difficult period of rebuilding the country and attempting to integrate the formerly Confederate states and grant civil rights to freed slaves. The war solidified the power of the federal government and ended the debate over secession. It also devastated the Southern economy, which would not recover for a century. The war was among the first to feature industrial warfare, with railroads, the telegraph, and mass-produced weapons playing crucial roles, foreshadowing the world wars of the 20th century. Its memory continues to shape American identity, with ongoing debates over its causes, monuments, and meaning. Confederate General Thomas "Stonewall" Jackson earned his famous nickname at the First Battle of Bull Run. He was later accidentally shot by his own men at the Battle of Chancellorsville and died of pneumonia a week later. Over the course of the war, as many as 1,000 women disguised themselves as men to enlist and fight as soldiers on both sides. The war saw the first use of repeating rifles, early machine guns, and ironclad warships, which fought to a draw in the famous Battle of Hampton Roads. Of the roughly 2.4 million soldiers who fought, the death toll is now estimated to be around 750,000, making it the deadliest conflict in American history. The American Civil War was more than a series of battles. It was a struggle over the nation's soul and its future. It tested whether a republic founded on the principle of liberty could endure internal division. The conflict answered that question with a resounding yes, but at a terrible price. The reunification of the states and the abolition of slavery were monumental achievements, but the struggle for equality and justice for all Americans would continue long after the guns fell silent. The war remains a central, complex, and often painful part of America's collective memory. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that shaped our world.